Board, Kathy Slade.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Kathy Slade, and I serve on the UU Fellowship of Ames Board of Directors. I want to thank you all for being here today and extend a special welcome to any visitors and guests. After the service, please consider staying online for a virtual coffee hour and join us in conversation. We also hope that you will sign the guest book on the UUFA website. Last March, the UUFA Board of Directors voted to close the fellowship building indefinitely. We continue to monitor the recommendations of the UUA and community health experts regarding conditions that guide the decision-making on when to reopen the building. A regathering task force is developing a plan to outline how we will return to the building when it is safe to come together in person again. We are committed to providing a safe environment for all who call our fellowship home. And while it's hard to be apart for so long, it's good to remember that even though the building is closed, the fellowship remains open. Please read the weekly email and check the UUFA website for a complete schedule of various ways we can be connected throughout the week. So, on behalf of this caring, nurturing congregation, I welcome each and every one of you to this virtual and sacred space. Here we invite you into an experience of transformation, hope, renewal, and connections, which may inspire you to understand life in new ways. Thank you for being here.
We begin our service with the ringing of the chime 3 times. The first to wake the chime, the second to open our minds, and the third to open our hearts.
In the world of the driven, let us be drawn in. Let your love be a given, let us be drawn in. To imagine, to dream, to create, to redeem, for the sake of the living, let us be drawn in.
Our chalice lighting this morning is Ignite in Us Radical Love by the Reverend Rebecca Savage. We light our flaming chalice as a beloved people united in love and thirsting for restorative justice. May it melt away the tethers that uphold whiteness in our midst. May it spark in us a spirit of humility. May it ignite in us radical love that transforms our energy into purposeful action. This chalice of audacious hope, this chalice shines a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move boldly towards our highest ideals.
In the world of the driven, let us be drawn in. Let your love be a given, let us be drawn in. To imagine, to dream, to create, to redeem, for the sake of the living, let us be drawn in.
Next, we'll have a recording of hymn number 95, There Is More Love Somewhere, sung by Jess Hoodman. Please sing along as you like, or just enjoy the music.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere.
Our January offertory recipient is the COVID-19 Emergency Fund for Story County Immigrants. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted many shortcomings in our government support structure, most notably for immigrants. This fund is locally managed and dispersed, providing assistance like rent, utilities, gas, and other necessities for our neighbors in need. Please visit our online giving page to make your donation. Thank you for your generosity.
Our Time for All Ages is a song and a little story by Leah Morris and her family.
Who will I be?
Who will I be?
What will I see
What will I see
in this great world?
in this great world?
Who could be free?
Who could be free?
And what will I build?
What will I build?
What will I find?
What will I find?
My story begins
The story begins
inside my mind.
inside my mind.
Who will I be?
Who will I be?
And what will I see
What will I see
in this great world?
in this great world?
Who could be free?
Who could be free?
What will I build?
What will I build?
And what will I find?
What will I find?
My story begins
Story begins
inside my mind,
inside my mind.
in my imagination.
My imagination.
What is an imagination? Lucy, do you know what imagination means?
I think imagination is what helps people create new things all the time. Because you can't create new things if you can't imagine what you want them to be.
That is absolutely true, Jacob. Everything human made was an idea first. You know, one of my favorite imaginers in history was Leonardo da Vinci. I loved that he imagined that human beings could fly hundreds of years before we figured out how to do it. And Dr. King is another great imaginer. His speeches about the dream that he had outlined a vision for how people could live better together in this country. It was all about having that vision first and then finding the words to communicate it. And then being inspired to certain actions that would bring it closer and closer to reality. Do you like to make up stories when you play with your magnets or when you play with your babies? That's using your imagination, thinking of stories and characters who are doing things all inside your mind. It's amazing. We have movies playing in our minds all the time. And it's really important to be the director of our movies, to recognize that we can tell ourselves stories that make us feel good or stories that make us feel bad. And we get to choose which thoughts we have. We just have to practice deciding how we use our imaginations. Can you think of something that maybe doesn't exist yet or that no one has ever seen, but that can make your life better or make the world better for those of us who are sharing it? I would love to know what kind of ideas you have about how the future could be and that you're already starting to imagine and that one day all of us will see. Who will I be?
Who will I be?
And what will I see
What will I see
in this great world?
in this great world?
Who could be free?
Who could be free?
What will I build?
What will I build?
And what will I find?
What will I find?
My story begins
Story begins
inside my mind,
inside my mind.
in my imagination.
My imagination.
Good morning. This is Jane Runnels, and our opening words are by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King from The Role of the Church in Facing the Nation's Chief Moral Dilemma. Our ultimate end must be reconciliation. The end must be redemption. The end must be the creation of the beloved community. We have before us the glorious opportunity to inject a new dimension of love into the veins of our civilization. The type of love that I stress here is not eros, a sort of aesthetic or romantic love, not philia, a sort of reciprocal love between personal friends, but it is agape, which is understanding goodwill for all men. It is an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. It does not begin by discriminating worthy and unworthy people. It begins by loving others for their sakes and makes no distinction between a friend and enemy. It is directed towards both. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opposers into friends. It is love seeking to preserve and create community. It is the love of God working in the lives of men. This is the love that may well be the salvation of our civilization.
Now is the time in our service when we share the milestones in our lives, things that are bringing us joy or challenge or appreciation. If you have a milestone to share, please unmute your microphone, state your name, and then when you're done, say, thank you for listening, so that we know when you're done and that someone else is able to talk, and be aware that in this virtual environment, it's easy to overlap. And so let's just be patient with each other.
This is Wes Shank. Can you hear me? Okay. I have a milestone. I think it's an unusual milestone, but for the times. I'm the oldest member in quite an extended family in Central California and in the Muscatine area. I have acquired an iPad and am beginning to learn from my son how to connect so I can text. This extended family texts itself. This is intergenerational connection. It influences me, and it's going to be a wonderful human connection, but it will also have an influence on the younger generation who are going to get to know one of the old folks. I'm very enthusiastic about it. End of message.
Good morning. This is Ralph Gandy. And I would like to light a candle in memory of Margaret Peggy Jean Gura, a longtime member of this congregation who passed away on January the 17th.
This is Sarah Carlson, and seems like we've had a number of health crises in my family recently, and I have 4 brothers, and my youngest brother this week was hospitalized and finally was diagnosed with MSD. At first they thought it was an acute leukemia, and this is sometimes MSD goes into acute leukemia. His hemoglobin and platelets were critically low, and he's going to be undergoing some therapy and will be in the hospital for a number of days. He's been there about a week already and faces about 10 more days, we're hoping, before he can go home. That's all.
This is Rilla Fox, and I just want to let you all know that our daughter-in-law in California recently was tested positive for COVID. Their family includes 5 people that all live in quite close quarters, so it seems likely that other members of the family will also test positive before it's all over. On the other side of our family, our other daughter-in-law's parents have tested positive for COVID. So it just keeps feeling like it's closing in more and more. Thank you.
We hold these milestones as well as those left unspoken in our hearts. Let's have a moment of silence. It is good to be together. We have some special music from Edmunds Revolution. Along with TSS Sanctuary Singing.
Will you be with me? Will you see me through? When the world is harsh, can I count on you? We have come this far, now it's up to you to be there. I stood up for you.
Good morning again. This is Jane Reynolds. This morning we have a special prayer by Dr. Reverend Raphael D. Warnock on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of death of Martin Luther King Jr., April 12th, 2018 in Baltimore is when this was spoken. I saw a great multitude of men and women, boys and girls, gathered together on a hill. There they were, diverse and variegated, hailing from the four corners of the earth. Yet they looked into each other's eyes, and they were not afraid. So I asked the one standing there, "What is this?" He said, "It is the kingdom of God, imbued with love and justice." And so I asked, "Where is this?" And he answered, "It exists already in the hearts of those who have the courage to believe and struggle." And so I asked, "When is this?" And he answered, "When we learned the simple art of loving each other as sisters and brothers." And so, O God, give us wisdom, give us courage for the living of these days, for the facing of this hour, as we bear witness to your kingdom. O God, who loves us into freedom and frees us into loving, to you we offer this prayer. Amen. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. Behold, I make all things new.
Now please join us in singing Building Up a New World. We have a recording from the Still Speaking Ensemble at the Washington Park UCC Church.
Good morning. What a week we have had. Martin Luther King Day and the Day of Service. There was a time for remembering those who've been lost to this pandemic, and an inauguration, a celebration that left me moved in ways I had not fully anticipated. Perhaps it was the way the images from Wednesday contrasted so from the images of the Capitol earlier this month. Images of the orderly transfer of powers in a democracy contrasted with images of mobocracy, which for the record is exactly what some of the nation's founders feared democracy would inevitably lead to. Perhaps it was the images of little girls holding up their own hands as they watched the swearing in of a vice president who allowed many Americans to see new opportunities open to them. Perhaps it was seeing a silver lining from COVID that transformed inauguration night from a celebration of celebrity, expensive clothes, and parties with music for the chosen few into a celebration of the talents of many more Americans available to all who cared to tune in. I know the deep divisions of our society are not healed. Faith in public institutions is not restored. Economic and racial justice remain unrealized, and COVID deaths will continue to rise. Still, I found myself breathing more deeply, and in some ways, I found myself ready to re-engage. But as I contemplated reimagining community during this time of persistent, deep division, marked by vilifying language, I found myself leaning into the question of what it really means to live more fully into the first principle of Unitarian Universalism, a recognition of the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And I asked myself, how is it possible to rebuild community in an atmosphere swirling with hate and distrust? Now, in some ways, we don't need to look far for our ideas. We have experienced earlier periods of turmoil in this country, most recently in the civil rights struggle. And in many ways, we remain mired in the as yet unrealized goals of the civil rights movement. In our opening reading today, we heard these words from Martin Luther King. Our ultimate end must be reconciliation. The end must be the creation of the beloved community and agape, and overflowing love that seeks nothing in return, that begins by loving others for their sakes and makes no distinction between a friend and enemy. It is directed toward both. A love that makes no distinction between friend and enemy. That seems like a challenge given some of the conflicts we may have found ourselves in during the past few months. In a 1967 lecture titled, "Where Do We Go From Here?" King described the logic behind his radical commitment to respond to hate with love. For I know that love is ultimately the only answer to mankind's problems, and I'm going to talk about it everywhere I go. I know it isn't popular to talk about in some circles today, and I'm not talking about emotional bosh when I talk about love. I'm talking about a strong, demanding love. For I have seen too much hate. I've seen too much hate on the faces of sheriffs in the South. I've seen hate on the faces of too many Klansmen and too many white citizens counselors to want to hate myself. Because every time I see it, I know that it does something to their faces and their personalities. And I say to myself that hate is too great a burden to bear. I have decided to love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. I have decided to love. That's a good lesson. Back in 1966, Martin Luther King actually spoke to the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly. In that address, he made clear that his decision to love did not mean accepting the perspectives of those with whom he was in conflict. It did not mean he excused hatred or didn't require change. So while he said things like, throw us in jail and we will still love you, threaten our children, bomb our homes, send your hooded perpetrators of violence into our communities at the midnight hours and drag us out on some wayside road and beat us and leave us half dead. And as difficult as it is, we will still love you. He also told his listeners to be assured that we will wear you down by our capacity to suffer. And one day we will win our freedom. We will not only win freedom for ourselves, we will so appeal to your heart and your conscience that we will win you in the process. And our victory will be a double victory. So King's message was not only one of radical love, but one of radical interdependence. His faith that radical love could defeat white supremacy, that is, it must ultimately win, is grounded in his understanding that is stated in his letter from a Birmingham jail. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. As a UU community, we are also called to recognize this network of mutuality, this interdependence, by our seventh principle: respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. While we often discuss this principle when talking about the actions that are needed to save the planet, for me, this principle also focuses attention on human interdependence. And this concept of interdependence is fundamental to my understanding of Unitarian Universalism. We Unitarian Universalists, wrote UU theologian Forrest Church, have inherited a magnificent theological legacy. In a sweeping answer to creeds that divide the human family, Unitarianism proclaims that we spring from a common source. Universalism proclaims that we share a common destiny. It can, however, be hard to really see or grasp this common destiny because we too often live separated from each other. We have so little knowledge about the experience of others. Dr. Howard Thurman, the professor who introduced Dr. King to Gandhi's philosophy, pointed to just this issue in his 1949 book, Jesus and the Disinherited, a book Dr. King said he always kept with him. It is necessary, Thurman argued, for the privileged and the underprivileged to work on the common environment for the purpose of providing normal experiences of fellowship. This is one very important reason for the insistence that segregation is a complete ethical and moral evil. Whatever it may do for those who dwell on either side of the wall, one thing is certain: it poisons all normal contacts of those persons involved. The first step toward love is a common sharing of a sense of mutual worth and value. This cannot be discovered in a vacuum or in a series of artificial or hypothetical relationships. Living up to our value of radical interdependence means opening ourselves to new learning and new kinds of engagement. We've had some opportunities here in the UUFA, and we'll have more. Reverend McCusick just wrapped up a monthly group that watched the entire Eyes on the Prize series. I'm sure Cynthia Martin would be happy to talk to you about engaging with Amos, a Mid-Iowa organizing strategy. And in recent emails from the fellowship, the weekly emails have included links to the UUA's 30 Days of Love project. As it says on the website, this is an annual celebration that runs approximately from Luther King Day in January through Valentine's Day in February. Each week, you'll find readings, videos, and other resources aiming to teach, inspire, and challenge us as individuals, as families, and as a religious community to live more fully into our values. I urge you to engage with these materials and connect with other UUs to talk about it. We need to continue to ask ourselves, what work am I called to do in the face of current challenges? One person who has taken up the call to build beloved community is the new U.S. Senator, Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock, who also serves as lead minister of Ebenezer Baptist Church, the church Reverend Dr. King once served. Warnock recently pointed out that the pandemic has provided clear evidence of our shared destiny, saying, this global, airborne, deadly disease has created a situation where my neighbor coughs. She might be sick, and I am potentially imperiled. But that doesn't make my neighbor my enemy. It just reminds me that our destiny is tied together. It means that I have got to have my neighbor's back, that if they are uncovered, perhaps I am unprotected. I would want them to have health care. I should want their children to have access to quality education. I should want them to be able to work with dignity and earn a livable wage and to retire. I should want for them equal protection under the law. The parable of the pandemic, he says, is that we are as close together in our humanity as a cough. And so it is in our own interest to create a more inclusive, peaceful, and just society. Can you hold in your imagination what that society might look like? In the time for all ages, Leah said she would love to hear what ideas you have about what the future might be. Who will we be? How will we get there? Though the answers were framed for children, they are clearly just as important for the rest of us. In 2018, during a service on the 50th anniversary of King's assassination, the same service where Dr. Warnock shared the prayer that Jane read earlier today, he also shared parts of King's vision of a new heaven and a new earth. Racism was gone, poverty was gone. It is a world where humanity resists the demons of militarism. This is a vision that Warnock continues to work toward, though he confesses that sometimes he gets tired of the work. And I know many of us have had a weariness of spirit during these challenging days. When that happens to Warnock, he says he just looks up. And I'd love to tell you, he continues, that when I look up, I see some grand and lofty vision of God riding across the milky deep. But truth be told, all I usually see is birds flying by. But I love to see birds fly by. I especially like to see geese because geese fly in a V formation. Pelicans flap their wings faster, but they don't go as far. If you want to go fast, fly alone. If you want to go far, fly together. Geese fly in a V formation. And the one out front, if he's a real leader, is actually working the hardest, leading by example. What I like about geese is that when the one out front grows tired, she just moves back further into the formation and another one moves up and takes her place. And geese do that without a church schism. They do that without a war. They do that without one side of the geese formation deciding to shut the whole geese government down. Why? Because geese understand that my individual location is not as important as our collective destination. Geese flying in formation offers a powerful reminder that none of us need walk alone as we navigate the challenges of this pandemic or as we work to build a new, more just, more inclusive world to carry us to our collective destination. It's also a powerful image of shared leadership, of stepping back and stepping up to bring your strength to the work. As we turn now to our closing song, Soon the Day Will Arrive, sung first in Hebrew and then in English, I invite you to consider how King's call to embrace radical love and his message of fundamental interdependence can help us further the mission of the UUFA, growing spiritually, creating community, striving for justice, learning to love.
ילדים בחופשה ישחקו תופסת בין הבית לבין השדות. עוד תראה כמה טוב יהיה בשנה הבאה. עוד תראה כמה טוב יהיה בשנה הבאה.
Soon the day will arrive when we will be together and no longer will we live in fear. And the children will smile without wondering whether on that day thunderclouds will appear. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Some have dreamed, some have died to make a bright tomorrow, and their vision remains in our hearts. Now the torch must be passed with new hope and not in sorrow, and the promise to make a new start. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Share if we care, you and me.
Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. This simple song reminds me of a new voice that we heard this week, a young poet who asked us to look at ourselves, saying, we've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it. So I want to close our service with these words from Amanda Gorman's inauguration poem. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption, We feared at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour. But within it, we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be. Amen. Blessed be. Let me say, on behalf of the Sunday Services Committee, we're really glad you chose to join us this morning, and invite you to stay for a bit, first to meet with a few others this morning in a breakout room where you can share your experiences of the week and perhaps pieces of the future you're now imagining. Blessings on your week.